Welcome everyone to another creative writing workshop. My name is Laurel. I'm the Director of Educators in VR and the founder of the Creative Writing Workshop. And we are going to be talking, I'm so excited. I can't even get my words out. I'm so excited. This is part 2 in our ongoing series in the month of February in 2026 on the Right Path workshop series. Last week we talked about the writing ecosystem, finding a comfortable space and dealing with some of the psychological as well as the physical aspects of writing and getting past all of the obstacles to improve our writing time, our writing space, and our writing objectives. Today we're going to be talking about the research architect. We're going to be looking at some of the tools, techniques, and tips to help you turn your curiosity into story fuel, to fuel that creativity. The Creative Writing Workshop meets every Tuesday here in EngageXR. Once in a while, we float around to some other platforms, to VR Chat and etc. for special events, but we are here every Tuesday in EngageXR. It is free. I'm so glad to have everyone here. Our mission is to create a supportive and creative educational environment for writers in VR. We've been doing this the longest, oldest, and the mostest, and since 2018, and I'm just thrilled that you all are here. So this is the first of the 2026 monthly workshops that we're doing on the writing path, taking an idea and moving it towards that draft to get ready to publish, share, whatever it is that you want to do. In March, we have our spring break, but the first week of March, we have a reading event. Everyone, please. Stephen, I expect you to bring an excerpt to read about no longer than 4 to 6 minutes to share with people. In April, I'm really excited. We're going to be diving into some virtual worlds to really explore storytelling from a world building perspective, building the world in and around your characters. And we're going to flip things upside down. Normally, writers think about the characters and then insert them into a world. We're going to create a world and insert characters. Really change things up to broaden your imagination and your character development as well as your world building in and around. So get ready for all of those things. All of our events are free. Welcome to join us every Tuesday. Now, the right path, we've covered the creative ecosystem. We're now on the research architect. Next week, we're going to be looking at how to build those living, breathing stories, taking all the research and finding that peace and vulnerability within yourself to really start to build these great stories that are all within all of us. And then in the last week in this part of this series called The Right Path, we're going to be talking about the drafting machine, looking how do you create that final draft. Not final, it's never final. Maybe your first, second, 85th, I don't know. Some drafts I'm still working on after 10, 12 years. So, but we're going to look at some editing and how to really pull all of that information together, and it's going to be great fun. So, hey, Melissa, welcome. So let's get on. We're going to talk about, we're going to talk about the research architect, turning your curiosity into story fuel. How do you do the research, handle the research, organize it, etc. Now, this is where Laurel does TMI. This honestly is a pile of my research. I was studying to be a professional genealogist until a few years ago, and then virtual reality and COVID and everything got in the way. But still on my goal list, And we're getting a little bit of background noise from you, Melissa, just letting you know that my team may mute you. You can unmute and ask a question at any time. Just we heard some background noise. So this is not a way to do research. This is the culmination of a bunch of research, but often this is what our research looks like. Come on, be honest. I know it. We all have those piles of research going on. Well, I have gotten my act together, and I use a variety of different ways depending on what it is that I'm writing and what my writing goals and purposes are. I have a lot of different ways that I organize the research. So I'm much better at it now. So be aware that you're not alone. In the chaos that comes with research, you're not alone. But it is so important that you have to be able to find your research. And that is one of the key things we're going to talk about is how do you store it, how do you find it, as well as all the rest of the stuff. Okay. Now, research is not discussed much by writing groups, though I think it is not only critical, but is one of the most fun things. And now we have a problem because once again, it seems to be this group. I'm going to be right back because things are crashing. So hit pause, Stance with Trees, and Steph, and Stephen, if you could out of it. You lost trust in there. It's so important. And we're going to be talking about how to deepen your characters, the culture, the communities, the society, all the world that goes beyond we're going to go beyond the facts to really, and we're going to avoid stereotypes and make your writing be layered with respectful characters and scenes and enrich your story with all of the colors of the paintbrush. We want that texture. Now, I want to quickly share with you, my husband is in a book club online, having way too much fun reading the classics. And this is an excerpt from The Grapes of Wrath. Y'all familiar with this? The Grapes of Wrath? If you haven't, read it. Game-changing book. It is so wonderfully written. In between the story of this family of farmers that have lost everything in the Depression, and they're packing everything up because their land has been destroyed by bad farming practices and weather and everything else, drought, etc. They're packing things up. In between the chapters of that story are these little paintbrush canvases that come in to help add to richness of the stories. And while I'm reading this, I want you to pay attention to the littlest of the details that comes from either exceptional research by the author or someone who actually lived through it and has that research experience. They know what's going on, and it builds layers upon layers. In the little houses, the tenant people sifted their belongings and the belongings of their fathers and of their grandfathers, picked over their possessions for the journey to the west. The men were ruthless because the past had been spoiled, but the women knew how the past would cry to them in the coming days. The men went into the barns and the sheds. That plow, that harrow. Remember in the war we planted mustard? Remember a fella wanted us to put that in that rubber bush that they call gayule. Get rich, he said. Bring out those tools and get a few dollars for them. $18 for that plow plus freight. Sears robot. Harness, carts, cedars, little bundles of hose. Bring them out. Pile them up, load them up in the wagon, take them down to town, sell them for what you can get. Sell the team and the wagon too. No more use for anything. 50 cents isn't enough to get for a good plow. That cedar costs $38. $2 isn't enough. Can't haul it back. Well, take it and the bitterness with it. Take the well pump and the harness. Take halters, collars, hames, and tugs. Take the little glass brow band jewels, roses red under glass. Got those for the bay gelding. Remember how he lifted his feet when he trotted? Junk piled up in a yard. Can't sell a hand plow anymore. 50 cents for the weight of the metal. Discs and tractors, that's the stuff now. I'll take it all junk, and give me $5. You're not buying only junk. You're buying junk lives. What are your thoughts about that? Where's the research? What do you see? Go ahead, unmute, shout out. We want to hear.
Every kind of farming implement there is.
Mm-hmm. And the cost when they were bought new, and now how much they're selling them for years later. Stephen?
Well, what strikes me is that one of the challenges of dealing with this kind of material is it's easy to introduce language and vocabulary that no one generations later understands. So, for example, these are poor people. They don't have a lot of money for expensive transportation. Somebody could say, well, how are you going to get there? Is it going to Shanks ponies? Which no one today knows what Shanks ponies means. You got to figure out how to introduce Shanks ponies and to explain it's, okay, you don't have it. So you're going to walk. That sort of thing. So what we've got here is it gives us a sense of the past, The prices for things tell us this is not in our era, but at least it's not using the vocabulary that we are required to explain without explaining.
Yes. But it uses simple terms.
Yeah.
And this
yeah.
is
And
published
recognizable.
Right, and this was published at a time that was not too distant from that his moment as well. So there wouldn't be a lot of change in here. But don't you love? This just gave hair on end, rising up with when they said that this was referring back to the belongings of their fathers and of their grandfathers. So immediately you have a sense of true history that's in here, and then remember in the war we started mustard. These are all of the cons, the things, the compelling by government and by, the people coming through, making them do these things, put in that rubber bush. Karis?
Yeah, I appreciate how instead of it being a laundry list of items, he never stops inserting the sense of loss. He breaks up the list with items with a little comment about how it feels to lose this, how it feels to be, what it meant, and so there's you've got a great list of items, but it's compounded with loss at every step.
Yeah, and it's layered and layered. And I love this last line that you're not buying only junk, you're buying junked lives. Very powerful line in there. Yeah. So that's part of that, how research can be used to add these little delicate, these wonderful layers, the details that are so critical to help us feel the story, not just read the story. We're not being lectured to. We learn through this almost osmosis of these words that paint the picture. So that's the magic of research. I said that genealogy is one of my big passions because I love telling this. I really hate the dash. They say that, what is how do you explain a person's life? It's the dash between the year they were born and the year they died. I want to explain the dash, and that's been very important to me in my life as a very passionate hobby. So we're going to use some examples for your research based on the GPS, the genealogical proof standard, because this revolutionized my thinking about how I do research. First of all, you have to have a clear objective. You have to name it and be very specific with what are you looking up? What are you trying to find? It begins by asking yourself, what do you know? And then what do you want to know? Because you are your own repository of great information. You don't walk into this with empty bags. You have something there. So what do you know, and then what do you want to know, and then where do you look? Where do you look? Where do you go? Knowing what you're looking for answers that question, but you have to be specific. So here's a great question. I'm still looking for this. It's been decades. Find Howard West birth certificate. Well, this is not specific. This is not helpful. What do I want to know? What do I know? And where am I going to find answers to this? So here's our problem. There are two Howards in the family. There's two Howard Wests. My question needs to be specific. Which one am I looking for? There's both of them were born Howard West, and it was a father and son. And years later, they added senior and junior, but it's not on their legal documents. So I need to be specific with which one and when. Now, here's part of the problem is that Howard Sr. was born between 1902 and 1905. Okay, that's the range I'm looking for. In where was he born? Am I going to look all across every database on the whole planet? No, I have it narrowed down that he was born somewhere between Michigan, or Canada, Michigan, across to either Oregon or Washington. Now, there's a lot of states in there, but that's my range. I have to be specific with that. And then what's the context? What's the context of why I'm looking for this information? And how do I put this in context? So here's my final question, which is find the birth certificate of Howard West senior, in quotes, born between 1902 and 1905 in Canada or the U.S., in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, Oregon, California, and Washington. At the time, unmarried women's births were often unrecorded. Pregnancies hidden. So the mother may have been staying with friends, family, or an unwed mother's home, likely in Canada or near Detroit, Michigan, where she had close friends and family. So you see the difference there between find Howard's birth certificate was like, okay, in the process of writing the question, I narrowed down my search. Now I've been through Canada and as much as I can, and Detroit as much as I can, found nothing. So my research has actually expanded across all these states. But that's this kind of specificity that you need to boil down that question to help you really figure out what are you really asking. That'll help prevent rabbit holes. So let's apply this. Okay, what is the physical cost of magic? I wish Tang Whistles was here. She would love this question. What is the physical cost of magic? So in ancient times, there was a cost. In fiction, there's always a cost. If you do magic, there's going to be a drain. Okay? So what's the context? Where is the, how's the magic being used? Is there context? We need to know, what does that mean? Is it physical, as in hurting your body? Is it spiritual? Is it a tangible? Are you going to there's many in the history of human culture, which you have to pull from human history for these things. You can invent things, but let's say you want to research and try to be fact-based on this. There's actual physical exhaustion from folk traditions and for ceremonies and things that physically tax the body. But there's also things where there's karma. So if it's going to cost, you get money, you're going to have to lose money. There's going to be some kind of a payment that comes through that. So you need to be clear with what that is, and then look for plausible physics. Where does the magic come from? What does physical really mean? And then the context can be: are you pulling from Celtic, Druid, Egyptian, witchcraft, Wiccan, religious, Greek, Vedic? There's so many different traditions that we carry with us. I'm a huge fan of Terry Pratchett's The Discworld. And the opening scenes are the fact that Discworld is a flat disc that is riding on the back of these elephants standing on the back of a turtle flying through space. Well, that is a Hindu symbolism right there. So that carries that forward into this fantasy that he's created. So really ask yourself a good question and you'll get a better answer. In genealogy, you take all of the evidence that you find and you gather it all together, and then you make sure you identify and you verify all the sources. It is so important that you have to be able to track down where that came from later on. So you need to verify this, and then you analyze it and you check for discrepancy, you check for conflict. And maybe when you're trying to figure out where, the physical cost of magic, you find conflicting information in history. You're going to need to make a choice or combine its inspiration, but look for conflict and see if you can figure out how you want to make your final conclusion. But write it down, write out your analysis, write down what the conflict is, write down what your conclusions are so you can come back to it. But often when you're writing, that's when the true discovery and the enlightenment can happen. You go, oh, I hadn't thought about it this way. Okay, that's cool. I love that. Okay, is this part of that process? So that's the genealogical way, but let's now, hey Nancy, welcome. Let's apply the genealogy questions, the process, to writing. The first question you need to ask yourself is, what is my story about? Just a little one sentence thing. What's it about? And then what must I get right? What does the main character need to know or already knows about their world? And then comes the lovely part of conflict. What do they get wrong? What do they screw up because they didn't follow the rules, whatever it is. And that's a really fun way to go. But ask yourself, what is your story about? What must it get right? What does the main character know about their world, and what do they get wrong? Because that makes it fun. What is your character going to bump into in their world? It's going to come up to bite them. You have really a great deal of fun. Any questions about this? Is this helpful?
Well,
Stephen?
certainly, yeah. Well, one of the things that comes up in this context, and my writing is divided into traditional history and historical fiction. And when you're dealing with historical fiction and you are recreating people of the past, on one hand, you want to know, how do they differ from you culturally? On the other hand, it's really easy to create a stereotype of what, I don't know, a Chinese woman in the 19th century was like. But then we have to remind ourselves that regardless of the period, people vary. And it's entirely possible to have somebody in a particular period who doesn't adhere to any of the norms of that period, because that's how human beings are like. And that's when it gets complicated. But it still has to be plausible.
It really does. And there's plausibility, and then there's the reality at the time and our stereotypical application on top of it. For example, when I'm doing genealogy family history research and I come across a 13 or 14-year-old marrying a 60 or 70-year-old man, what's your first thought?
My thought would be, what period is it? When is it?
Yeah. But you have the experience of that. Ew is the right thing. Our perspective of it today is icky. That is rape. That's child molestation. Is everything. In the 16, 17, 1500s and so on, even in the 1800s, when a daughter is orphaned, a young man could be sold, could be put into apprenticeship and all kinds of things. But a young girl, when their parents die, which was very common, tuberculosis, the white plague, and all the other diseases that came through, that girl, if she had property, if she had access to inherited property, that could be taken away. And so there were many arranged marriages of older bachelor men or widows that it was totally arranged, had nothing to do with sex, where they were married in order to protect the girl's property. And it was usually a distant, second, a cousin or something like that. But often it was just a very close friend of the family. There's always those old men that are hanging around, whatever it is. But that was normal and it was accepted. But when we are looking from our perspective back on history, we get judgmental. So be aware of those things, because we need to stop doing that and look at the context of what happened in that history. So you're absolutely right, Stephen. Great example. All right. Now, where do you find the research? Read and watch. There's so many things. Watch TV, movies, documentaries. There's so much information that's out there. So many books that are out there like crazy. Find them, read them. Nancy's doing research for her book, and I love looking at her collection of books. I just look there and just lust. I love it. It takes work to really, especially if you're doing history. You need that research. You need to understand that culture, the times, and how things worked, and observe. In our recent reading session, I told a story of based on standing outside of Walmart waiting for my husband to pick me up because he ran an errand while I was running into Walmart. And I saw a lady came out of the store, and I had a story. I had a great short story from that. I could turn it into a whole novel. It was such a profound little moment. Pay attention to the people, the things, the building, everything around you. Learn the names of architecture, clothing, all these bits come into this process. Ask questions, ask as experts, ask people. Interview people if you need to do the research online or in person, and visit the places. When you go to visit the places, and I've been very, very lucky in my life to actually be able to visit the places that I write about, Before you go, know what your goal is. Why are you going there? What's the purpose of that? And research before you go so you can know as much as you can. You're not walking in ignorant. And then write out your research questions. What are the questions you need answered? And then identify those sources are and make a plan. And what is so beautiful is that kind of preparation allowed me to go into, these are pictures of my niece and my mom's wandering around somewhere, in Westminster Abbey in London. And we were able to get into one of the private ancient libraries there. And so my niece is reading about my family in one of the ancient books. And then there's, because I researched, I made an appointment in advance, I was able to go up the Harry Potter style staircase. Oh my God, this staircase was so awesome. Up to these little tiny weird offices that overlooked the back alleys of Westminster Abbey, actually the center squares of it. And that's where I could actually talk to the historians and the librarians there who are experts on this. Not only on the, because this is a library, I'm sorry, a library, this is an abbey that's over 1,000 years old. And they have so much information. It was so wonderful, but I didn't waste their time because I knew what I wanted before I got there. And they appreciated that. Stephen?
One of the things that people don't realize when you're doing, particularly writing historical fiction in the context that you're describing, is that historians tend to write about politics, philosophy, a huge range of international issues. What they
Absolutely.
don't write about is what people on a day-to-day basis do in their lives, what I would call, or professionals call, material culture. That's why, I mean, they don't talk about how was the tea and the toast made. That's generally not in books, which is another reason why when you can go to these real historical spots or historical recreations, it's really important, because the biggest thing you need in writing a story is material culture, which usually doesn't end up in books.
Yeah, it depends. I don't say that's very true of all historians and librarians, because I know some who have given me details like that with a material culture that I would have never known. Like, do you know how they held their spoon, what the shape of their spoon was? It was like, which, by the way,
and
if
that's
anyone
that's a really recent
Okay.
development in historical studies.
Yeah, if anyone is in North Carolina, outside of Greensboro, North Carolina, is it just went blank. Something Unlimited. It's I can't remember the name. Anyway, it is a huge place that collects and actually has a little museum in it and tours that they do, silverware and china, and everything associated with the dining table, period. Everything you can imagine. There's other tchotchkes that are in there and things, but they have historical silverware and plates and china sets and everything. And for the life of me, I know it's something Unlimited. If anybody remembers it, it's an amazing place to actually go and see forks and knives and things from the year 200 and before even BC.
Northern Vermont has a museum like that. It's the museum of what we usually throw out. And it's absolutely wonderful. And that's what you need to write fiction.
Yeah, please. Absolutely. Put a link to that, please, in our Discord, and I will find Replacements Unlimited.
It's in Burlington, I think.
Yeah, but right outside of Greensboro, North Carolina is Replacements Unlimited, and it's an amazing place. So there's so many places to get this information and to get all the details that are in there. And so go visit, but be prepared before you walk into this. Now let's talk about AI research really briefly. It works the same way as any other form of research, but what you get as answers is based on garbage in, garbage out. So not every AI will give you the same answer because they don't have the same large language LLM that's attached to it. The data that's in there may be different. So if you choose to do AI research, which, it's up to you, be really specific and clear with your question and know that not all AIs are the same, and ask it to include sources. Some do automatically, some don't. Or you have to dig for it. Make sure that you have it in there. And then depending upon how much you use it, and this is a whole nother discussion, we are still in the early days of AI when it comes to authorship. Some publishers and some industries require, and genres require, that you actually give AI full credit for any, I don't know to what extent, because you'll have to check and see. So just verify, and keep track of these things to know if you have to cite the AI as in footnotes, or you put it into the back and that you use this and this and this to help you the research, or to what extent and things. Be aware that that's an evolving part of this process. But AI has helped solve questions that I've been researching for years, and I couldn't get any. I researched everything, and bang, Steph actually said, well, why don't you just ask the AI? And I did, and I got answers, and it was like, oh, yay! I was so excited. It was amazing. Because it just pulled from so many different places to break that dam that I had in my head. There are so many ways. I can do an entire session just on the sources of all the research tools and sources that are out there, histories, timelines, photographs, postcards, maps, all these different things, government records. Because you're writing fiction, dive into government records. I have found the most amazing inspiration in the weirdest places and academic databases. And don't forget VR, go into some of those immersive worlds like in VR Chat or here or other platforms. They can be incredibly inspiring. I want to tell you quick about one of my really dear friends who's a professor of historical music, and he has written, and I've helped him write and publish several books, and he collects old postcards as part of his research. Because into old instruments and artists, you would not think that would be helpful. But he digs through antique stores and big rumor sales and whatever he can find, digs through all these photographs because he finds pictures of antique instruments often in the background. But he also looks at the clothes they wear. He studies mostly stringed instruments, but other things as well. Their body positions, their hair, their how they hold the instrument, if they're actually holding it. All these things help him visualize these instruments and tell stories about them, because some of the instruments that he's writing about no longer exist. And he's actually worked with luthiers and other artists and craftsmen to recreate these instruments that no longer exist. And he uses old photographs and things. Really fascinating. Stephen?
Well, let me jump in with a specific example about how AI is different now. In the past,
okay, we're going back to AI. Okay.
Well, you had a question.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
And you said, well, I think I could get the answer to that question in an archive, in a particular book, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you went. You went off and found the book that you thought was on the topic. Then you looked to see if your question was there. Same thing in an archive. But now you can ask a specific question. For example, I did this morning. I wanted to know if a Chinese woman in the 1890s would have been allowed into a hospital in San Francisco. Now, I could have gone and looked at a bunch of different books on the history of medicine in San Francisco, the institutional history of hospitals, et cetera, but I couldn't have asked that specific question. The AI was able to do it. I was using Gemini 3.5. And then, of course, it came with the sources. So it allows you to do a much more specific question and then get answers and then decide what you're going to do with them.
Absolutely. And that's part of the magic. If it has access to those sources, that's the key. So just be aware that not all of them do. Excellent. Good. Thank you. Now, as you're processing, you have all that research. Remember, you gather all that information together. You need to analyze it. There are so many ways of doing this. Again, this is a subject that I could teach for a year and not be tired of it and not run out of, as you can tell from Stephen and others, not run out of this. This is a whiteboard. This is one of so many different versions I've done in researching some genealogy as part of the story that I've been working on my great-grandmother. And part of that birth certificate I'm hunting for. And so process how it works for you. Use whiteboards, use blackboards, use sticky notes, I've used index cards over the years. I've done this over and over and over again, looking for new perspectives. Scrivener is, the writing studio is brilliant. I love it. And it allows you to see your story in different ways. Anytime that you see things from a different perspective, that opens up your heart and mind to new possibilities. So the ability to use the scrivenings, which is the plain white paper, or to use it as, the big long document, or to use corkboard, to use the outline and see as you pace your story and understand things, you can spot gaps and you can actually identify and put marks down on where you need to research and what you need to research. When you have research and you add it in something like Scrivener, This is two views here. I can add, like, this is a map from Google Earth that I put in, or yeah, I can't remember if it's Google Earth or Google Maps. Anyway, the terrain of the area where I was researching. And then I can use the split view. I add it to the research in Scrivener, and I can use the split view so I can look at it while I'm writing about it. You can do this with articles, with newspapers, with magazines, with, again, photographs, maps, whatever it happens to be. I use a lot of plat maps to help locate where people are when I'm writing about them. Really wonderful to not just print it out and have it sitting on my desk, but have it right there as I'm writing, right next to it in the same window. Now, here's some basic tips. Okay, now we're going to dive into organization really quick here, because we're going to probably run over a little bit, so just giving you a warning, because we had a little interruption, technical problems here. There's many ways you can start your research first and then start writing. You can write and then research, or you can research while you're writing. It doesn't matter, and research needs to be a constant. You need to constantly go back and fact check and verify, make sure, you know, you mess something up there, you in doubt, not sure what's going on, but as you go, be aware that research is not, there's no rules to this process. And then identify what research you need as you go through. Make notes as you're going through. If an idea hits you, ask yourself, do I need to research it? What do I know? What do I not know? Quick run through of the questions, and then make a note to yourself in the software you're writing with, on a sticky note, whatever it happens to be. Identify any of your research needs and then make a plan for it. Do it. Many people, I'm one of them, will put a timer. If I'm writing and I'm in writing mode and I need to look something up, depending on what I'm writing and how much time I have, I actually will set a timer. I'll say 5 minutes, and then it stops, because that keeps me from rabbit holing. Or 10 minutes, or whatever it is, or 30 seconds. I will look something up, because when I'm in writing mode, I want to stay in writing mode. But if that little block goes, I'm going down, what was that called? What was that place called? And I can't write the next word because my brain is locked. That's when the timer comes out. And that puts an imperative on it, so I can research, oh, that's the name, boom, come back to the writing. And I don't lose that momentum. And then plan on revisiting your research points. Come back to them a second time, a third time. Why really important with the next part that we're going to be talking about, organizing your research, you want to come back, because sometimes you can learn something a second or third time that you didn't see the first time. Okay, now let's talk about organizing research. There is no perfect system. There is your system. You can write this all down in a notebook. You can draw pictures. You can do whatever you want to. You can use template forms. You can put this in Scrivener and set up the templates with character sketches and scene sketches and research information. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's your system. So what I'm about to show you is just a combination of systems that you choose, that I strongly recommend. But these are suggestions. It's up to you. You need to have your own system of what works for you. So my niece came to me and said, I want to write the story of my family, because she's got quite a story to tell. So we started setting her up, and that gave me it gave me a chance to actually take pictures of setting something up the right way from scratch, my way from scratch. She had input into this. So I'm going to take you through, and there's her kitty, this process, so you can, to give you some good suggestions and recommendations. Priority through all of this, you need to have consistency. Whether you're working with paper or digital, they need to match. You don't need a different system for paper and a different system for digital. Keep it consistent. You can use Notebook. You can use file systems. I've used them all. And I have different projects that I only want to put in Notebook because they're not very big. I have other projects where I have 2 freaking lateral file cabinets filled with just one book, with all the research that's in it. You have your own, that's your system, but these are the 2 most common ways of doing this. You start by organizing things by book title if you do more than one book. There's, again, not a perfect way. This is a general way. You have your characters. Who are all the characters in your story? You have the time period. And the time period is important because that's, You want to, what's the habits, the history, what are common practices and all the different things in there. And then the location is different from the time period. That's about the physical attributes, the geology, the weather, the things that are associated with the location, and then the culture and the community. And we're going to get into details with this. I'm going to go through this kind of fast because we're running out of time. All right, under characters, there are templates that will help you do this. But you can, depending on how many characters you have and how much detail you want to go into, you can just have one folder per character, or you can break it down to their description, their psychology, a timeline of their life, their ancestry, about the parents, the grandparents, or do they claim that they're Greek or they're Norwegian? Is that important to your story? Whatever that happens to be. Their stages of their life to really go, okay, what was their childhood like? What was their, teenage years, et cetera, et cetera? How much depth do you want to go in there? The relationships and so on and so forth. The amount of detail that you put in here is important if you need to find it fast. So if you have a ton of information about their childhood and very little about their adulthood, maybe you have a huge folder for that. It depends on how much information you have and how much data. And you need to choose, this is your story, your process, your way of telling the story. Under time period and location and culture, you can break this down however you need to. I have early years, middle years, and end years. That's reflective of a character's, what was going on in the world around those time periods. But it depends on what your story. If your story crosses centuries, then you have to divide things by year so you can quickly find what happened in 1880. You want it however you need to have that. The location, how many scenes do you have? 1 or 2? Then you can dump them all in location folder. But if you have 20 or 30 scenes and you want to go, what was the most common plant that I did research on in northern Michigan in the 1920s, and or what were the names of the trees? You can go right in there, look at Michigan, look under trees, and there, boom, or plants, and there would be the name of what that you needed. Whatever that detail is, again, it's up to you how detail-oriented you want to be. You can make folders and subfolders and tabs and whatever you want to categorize and group that information to help you find it fast. When you are getting all that information, gathering it together, write the dates and titles on the pages if you're printing them out. Even if they have them on there, make sure that you write where you found them and the date you found them. Just a little note at the top. I found that I used to put sticky notes on these because I went, I'm not going to write on these. Write on them because the sticky note falls off. And then you're stuck, where did I get this? I don't know where it came from. Okay, but use the same process as you're writing that this was something that was in Valencia and Spain, or Spain, Valencia, however you want to do the hierarchy of it. When was it, and da-da-da-da-da. Same thing with file names. Nursing shift routine 2021. That is, that was COVID. You need to write about that. You found a research about what were the standards that happened in there. If you're referring back to it, name it so you can find it and make sure it's pretty clear. And color code. Now, I have spent a lifetime renaming files. I'm the file renamer queen. I hate it, but I came up with a system with my genealogy, keep track of things. Because I'd be looking at things, and so I have a folder here called original scans over on this side here. If things get moved around, I don't know original scans of who, of what, where'd they come from? So I need a better name for those. I have a file here called scans 0050 and 2 in parentheses. Now, does this mean it's a duplicate? Usually when there's a number after a file, it means a duplicate. Except that I spent a lot of time scanning photo albums, and then I pushed it through software that divided up automatically the multiple, one scan into multiple little ones to break the pictures up into single images. And they named them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, I don't know what there's a scan of, and did I do that, or is it really a duplicate? I need to rename these things. I came up with a system that works for me, that puts the names, the dash dates, what it is, the year, the location, and then a description in there. You're allowed 250 characters. I'd keep it shorter, closer to 200, that you can put in to really help you name those files. So you're not looking at PDF 1, PDF 2, and PDF 3 years from now and have no idea what it is, and you have to dig through it. So you can quickly do this with software right in Windows or Mac. You can rename things. I use a variety of different renaming tools when I'm doing group things, but copy paste, whatever it is. Do it right the first time, and you don't have to come back and redo it. I've been redoing this for years, so I didn't do it right the first time. I got in a hurry. And then when you're color coding is a great way to visually group collected information together, and then make a list. So my niece put the little sticky notes on there, which I knew were going to fall off, and they did. And she called me up and said, "I don't know what color what means." I said, "Just look at them and figure it out." She went, "Oh, okay." But you can identify for her direct ancestors were color coded. And then the manila folders were for the general information. So she knew at a color that the purple represented her mom's family, the yellow represented her dad's family. She could go in there and find any information she had stored. You can do the same thing with your characters if you choose to get this, fussy about it. But color coding really, really does help if you have a complex research project and story. Track your research. You literally need to be able to go back and find, where did you find this information, and what information did you learn? Otherwise, you just keep, I can't tell you how many times I have forgot to keep track of it, and I went back and I went, this is familiar. I've seen this before, over and over again, and because I forgot I did it, and that happens. But you also need to revisit because it helps you learn more. So got her a notebook so she could keep track of it all. Here is one that's used in genealogy, and it's a really good template. The date you did the research, you don't need a lot of information. The date you did the research, where you researched, what were you looking for? What was that question you were trying to answer? And then if you have a call number or any form of ID in there, you put that in there. And then what was the source? What did you find? What was the source you looked up? And if it has a document number, that's great. And then what were the results? I have dug through so many things and found nothing. Now, maybe I can go back through a database or go through a library or go through some kind of collection to find something. But at the time that I looked, I found nothing. So should I revisit it? I don't know. But knowing that at that time on that date, I didn't find any information can be helpful. But if you did, make a note of it. And then if you really want to get sophisticated, you can number your research and then trace it back to this research log so you can have some kind of an index and inventory. It depends on how anal retentive you want to be about the process, but that helps. And then have a research checklist. There are templates. I'm not going to give you any. There are templates and things all over the web. For if you're doing historian, you want to research a person, the genealogy records are great. Writing checklists are all over the place that help you to remind you to check these things, to double check on it. And so dig into that. And then honestly, this is part of your homework. I want you to think about your research, and I want you to write down your process. Write down the techniques you use, the software you use. If you have a structure for your files, your digital files, write it all down, type it all up. If you use color coding, put it in there. If you have specific research sources that you go back to over and over and over again, add them. I have all of this on a single piece of paper, two-sided, and I stick it in. I have it printed out that's sitting on my file cabinets. I have it sitting in different spots repeatedly so that I can find it, not lose it. But make yourself a research guide to remind yourself how you did this for this particular book, and use it going forward and learn from every time, or the story or whatever it is. It really, really helps. And I'll include a copy of this when I upload my notes for you all in our Discord. But keep track of that. I can't tell you how many times I've started something new and went, how did I do it last time? Boom, I've got it sitting there. It took me years to get to this document. It's the most helpful thing I have in my whole system. Just to remind me, what software did I use to do the scanning and splitting the pictures into different pieces? Yeah, there you go. So when you're using the research, as we said, make sure that you show it the character experience, you sprinkle, you don't dump things in, and really go for that accuracy because you're building trust. And just to review, because I'm going to have you do a quick session again, we're going to run over, my apologies. Your writer's research question is based on what is your story about? What must I get right? What does the main character know about their world and all the elements that are within it? Whether it's the magic, whether it's the animals, the dinosaurs, the dragons, or the cars, or whatever it happens to be. What do they know about this? And then what do they get wrong? That's a little magical question that can really help with this, with your writing. All right. I know I fire-hosed you at the end here, but I want to talk about Angela is a barista in a busy city cafe. What would be the research you would want to find, and where would you go to look? Go ahead, unmute, and I want to hear. Melissa?
Well, I would go to a city cafe and just sit there and observe people having coffee and watch how the barista interacts with their coworkers and the employees.
Excellent, excellent. What else? Stephen?
Well, if you want to do it right, you get a job. Because
Yeah,
the barista's world is only partially what you can see as a customer.
absolutely.
There's a whole larger dimension by getting that job.
There are also classes you can take, manuals you can read. But what else would you want to know about Angela that you should research? Melissa?
Her age, just what does she do outside of work? Why did she apply to work at a coffee cafe?
Beautiful, beautiful. What else? Why is her age important? Why would we want to know her age? There's two parts to that. There's age and then there's something else. What else? Melissa?
I think her age will define like how much energy she has after work and at work, and also her conversation. Like how are you going to write how she speaks? So basically, you have to zero in on her character.
Yeah. Now that is also complemented by what element is necessary besides her age?
Well,
Can you
an
repeat
obvious
that? I'm
thing.
sorry.
Okay.
Is what else? It's important to know her age, but there's a little other really important element to it that you alluded to, Melissa.
Oh, what? I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's okay. Time period. When is this happening? Because her age is reflective of not just her age, she has her psychological age, her physical age, but also the time period she's in. So is this a barista from in the 1700s, is a cafe, or is this one that is happening now? And that time period becomes really important. Stephen?
Well, an obvious thing is, why is she a barista? I mean, you can have a barista. This is the job. Don't have skill sets beyond that, and that's how they earn their living, and that's how they pay the mortgage. Or is she a barista who is really going to auditions because she wants to be an actress? And that changes everything, the dynamic of the character.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it adds to your research. Now you have to study the acting part and auditions and things. That adds to it when you have that information. Excellent, excellent. And yeah, is she doing this because she really loves people? Or is she doing it because she's got to pay the bills and her friend owns the place and said, here, you can come work for me until you get your head out of from underwater. There's a whole lot of questions. There's many, many questions that go into this. And then there's so many ways to research that by observing, by attending classes, by actually getting the job, by talking to owners, to actually interviewing people who've been doing this for a long time and people who've been doing this a very short time. Because there's a difference in that, but also learning, actually studying and learning about the history of being a barista. there is history, there is culture behind this. And it is something that has evolved from pubs, the earliest days of pubs, and being part of that social connection. So there's a lot of historical elements in there. Well done, well done. So is this helpful? Did you enjoy this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Ian says yes. Yeah.
I definitely
Yeah?
enjoyed it. Yeah, thank you.
What lesson did you learn, Melissa?
Well, I guess although I'm not really a creative writer, I just think taking things into context and just applying some of the skills that you use to do creative writing in my own writing and observations of people and making observations and just conclusions, just and then also practicality, bringing it into my business, the job I currently have. So,
Which is?
I am a training manager. So,
Oh, excellent. So this is all
Yes.
the psychology of it. Wonderful.
yes,
Yeah. Wonderful. Good. Okay, Stephen, did you learn anything or you knew it all?
Well, obviously people have different perspectives. There is one thing I would object to is your timer. When you get into creative writing, God forbid, don't stop for 30 seconds to look something up. You just say, figure it out later and keep going. Because when you
Agreed.
really get into that, you can't stop the momentum. And the thing that happens that writers really know if you really get into it is when you're writing, things happen you didn't know were going to happen 30 seconds before. And that's one of the strangest things that happens when you really get into creative writing. And it's apparently fairly common.
It is very common. And that's why I put literally like a 30-second, 2-minute time on it, because that's really critical for me. That's my method. But I also, one of the tricks I didn't add, because there's a million different ways, doing this. Again, this is just a paintbrush, brush strokes over the top of it, is that when I have something that I need to remember, I need to look up, I put XXXXXXX, I write down, I do a brain dump of whatever it is and describe as much as I can, hit XXXXX, and then I keep going, because I know that if I don't get that out of my head, I will stop writing. And then I can go through how many times you use the word XXXXXXX, and I can search and replace and find them and then deal with it later. And so we talk about that a lot in our writing sessions, that's a common practice to do. So, all right, y'all. Thank you for very much. I'm sorry that ran a little bit over. We'll fix it in the edit. This is part of the right path. And the last week we're talking about the creative ecosystem. Today is about the research architect, and next week is on building living, breathing stories. And then we're going to head into the drafting machine before we head into March, where we have we're just going to have a reading event. We're going to take spring break, and then in April we're looking at worlds in 3D, taking our creating a world and then injecting our characters into it. And we've got a whole year of awesome topics that our team came up with. I'm really looking forward to this year. So come join us every Tuesday here in Engage XR with our creative writing workshop. My name is Laurel, and I'm so glad that you are here. Thank you.